So when we talk about how much search occurs, I think this is a really interesting article that I'm going to discuss. So the article talks about search goods and experience goods. The difference between a search good and an experience good is essentially how much information you can know about a product and its attributes um, before you actually purchase and use the product, right? It could be that, information search is costly. It's because, direct experience is just more important and it kind of gives you, more insight, so on and so forth. So that's the main difference between kind of search goods and experience goods. So what the article goes on to do is test kind of, which one of these types of goods, search goods and experience goods, do people spend more time actually searching for, right? How much information search occurs for these goods. And what they find, I think, is pretty interesting. So essentially, experience goods, you spend more time on pages that have information about experience goods, but you actually review fewer pages, right? Than you would if it was a search good. So if it was a search good, I think you maybe skim information, but you look at a lot of pages. On the other hand, if it's an experience good, you really pay attention and you read each page carefully. So for experience goods, I also thought this was pretty interesting. So consumer reviews and videos and these kind of things will actually increase the amount of time spent on a website or a domain. This makes a lot of sense to me because for an experience good, you're trying to get as much information as possible because it might be costly to buy the good, or your real, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, knowledge of the good won't come until you actually purchase and use the product. The other thing that the article finds is that free riding, meaning you go to one website to look up the good, but then you buy it from another, is less likely to occur with experience goods. I think this makes a lot of sense because I think with experience goods, you trust the company or website that gives you more information about the experience good. So if a company or website gives you more information about the good, you go ahead and you purchase from them. Whereas if it's kind of you know, um, a search good, right? A good that, you feel comfortable buying anywhere, then yeah, you can look on one website to read the reviews and then buy it somewhere else. You can go, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and buy this on Amazon, even though I read about it on Ulta, this kind of a thing. And I think that happens a lot. If you're buying a computer, I would actually argue that computers are often kind of experience goods because they're pretty costly. And you really want some experience with it before you kind of know what it's about. And I would argue that providing more information about a computer would lead you to buy the computer from that particular website. So those are things to keep in mind when you're thinking, how do you stop free riding, which a lot of companies are trying to stop, right? It's like Best Buy tried to stop free riding when people were going into Best Buy. They called it showrooming. When people go into Best Buy but then go back and buy the product on Amazon, you have to think about what kind of goods you're thinking of and kind of if it's an experience good, right? Like a lot of goods at Best Buy, I would argue, it makes sense that they create this new platform, which is what they did, where you can actually experience the good by taking pictures with the camera in the store or touching, the computer, right? So they created this whole new platform for their experience goods. And what they found is, they created these product expert roles in the store so people were able to get more information from the people in the store. And what they found is using that approach, they cut down on the amount of showrooming or free riding that was occurring at Amazon.com. And one thing that they did is they took stock of the products in their store. A lot of them are experience goods. And so, this is one of those situations, in my opinion, where you read an academic article and you can immediately link it with something that you see in the real world. So, what's really interesting is if you think about how people search for information, in general. So a lot of people will use generic terms. So when people want something like boots, they'll just use a generic term. 70% of people, they'll say something like boots or black boots or tall boots or something like this. 20% of consumers will say a specific retailer. So they'll say, take me to Zappos or something like this. And 10% of consumers use specific products. I'm looking for an iPhone. I want Nike athletic shoes. And if people are using generic terms, what happens? Well, one thing that's happened is that Google and Facebook, I think, is number 2 right now, making a ton of money on ad revenue from these search words. So Google has AdWords, and what they do is you pay them so that you can get an ad on their screen when someone types in shoes. So if someone types in, boots, then you might see Target come up as a link, but it's a sponsored link. What's interesting was that a while ago, I say a couple of years ago, 2 things happened. One, we realized that Google's making a ton of money off of these off AdWords, I would say, and that people didn't really know that the links that they were being provided were ads. So you would see Target on the right hand side of the screen, and you would think that Google just pulled Target out when in fact Target is paying for it. And so what Google agreed to do is put the ads on the very top and make it a little bit more plain that these are sponsored ads. The other thing that we've seen happen, and we've seen less of this, is that some companies have been using what they call SEO, where they manipulate algorithms. So they do certain things, and you can look into this if you'd like, to manipulate Google's algorithm. So if you put in red boots or black boots, Kohl's was was it called? No, so Overstock.com was caught doing this. They manipulated the algorithm so that their website showed up as one of the top links because, as you can imagine, most consumers just click the top links and go from there. So, what Google does, if you're caught manipulating their algorithm, is that they make it so that your page or your website is pushed to the back of the line. So it used to be that if you put in black boots, Overstock.com would be one of the top links, maybe top 4 or 5, something like this. Well, Google came in and said, listen, for the next X number of months going forward, when someone puts in black boots, you're going to be on the 5th page. And we know that the average consumer doesn't go through 5 pages of Google responses or results. And so basically that means all the people who are using Google weren't using Overstock when they typed in generic terms or specific products. So that's a bad deal for Overstock, but at the same time, I would argue fairly appropriate for what they were doing. So we do know that people go to search engines when they're looking for information, but people also do other things. They go to online only retailers. They look at apps for retailers with physical stores. So for example, I know Sephora has been trying to get me to download their app, which is hilarious because I only go to Sephora like twice a year. Social networking sites, online video websites, coupon and daily deal websites. Again, lots of information out there that consumers use. Really interesting is that there's some research that shows that consumers get frustrated by the lack of information in stores. More importantly, there are some negative consequences to that information, to the lack of information, right? 2 in 3 customers or shoppers say they tried to find information, they couldn't find all the information they need. So what happens? 43% of those consumers leave frustrated. 41% are likely to shop elsewhere. 22% say they buy less information or buy less from are less likely to buy from the retailer if they don't provide enough information. I think what this points to is this idea that we are becoming so much more of an information driven society. We're so used to having the internet at our fingertips and getting information from the internet that we feel as though when we go into physical locations, we should be able to just get information there as well, particularly more information than we get now. So I will give you some examples of my biggest pet peeves. And I mean, these are my biggest pet peeves. I'll start with the left. So I know because research has shown that the average consumer is more likely to be attracted to pictures on a menu, right? And yet you continue to go to places that only have certain pictures on their menu. Now I know they are doing that because those might be favorites, those items might be favorites, or because they're specials, things like this. But I actually don't see why we can't have restaurants give us picture menus, or at the very least, provide us with QR codes so we can scan them and see a picture of the food item. At the end of the day, I really like to look at pictures when I'm making my decisions. Similarly, well, not similarly, but still a pet peeve. If I do go to somewhere like Sephora, and one of the students in this class actually has talked about the fact that you get this information overload. There are so many brands of products at Sephora. There are so many different brands, so many different types. So this is YSL. They have, look at all the different things they have. Liquid lipsticks, like the more physical regular lipsticks, lip gloss. I just different things, right? And yet, I know that if I were to shop from home, not only could I see these products, I could see like reviews of them and stuff like this. I wish I could get that exact same experience in the store. So I wish, again, maybe it's QR codes, maybe it's something like this, maybe they just have a little small computer up to let me know. At the end of the day, I feel as though I'm not getting enough information in the store, and oftentimes I leave the store frustrated. So there are typically a few things that consumers do when they're coping with missing information. They may delay the decision until the missing information is obtained. I do this a lot when it comes to reviews. I don't really buy products with no product reviews. And if it's on something like Amazon, I always look up the product reviews using an algorithm. I love fakespot.com because it kind of tells me whether or not I can trust the reviews that you see on Amazon. So something like that. Some consumers will ignore the missing information and use available information. Oh, it doesn't really matter that there are no product reviews. I really like that shirt, so and it says that it fits my size. I'm going to go ahead and buy it. So customers will do something like that. They may change the decision strategy that to one that accommodates the missing information. Let's say you were thinking about two different brands. One has, full information and one is missing information. So one has, let's say, consumer reviews and another does not. You might just go ahead and buy the product with the consumer reviews because you feel as though you would know more about the product. The last thing you do, of course, is that you infer the missing information, right? So there are no product reviews, but you see kind of puffs on the shoes and you go, oh, that's fur on the boots. But really, if you had waited for the reviews, it would tell you that it was faux fur and it fell off after 2 days. Those those kind of things, right? So people cope with missing information in a lot of ways. One thing that I want you to take away from this slide is that missing information doesn't necessarily mean that consumers will not go ahead and buy their product anyway. So something to think about. So marketing strategy when it comes to information search. I was gonna say missing information. You want to get the products into the consumers' evoke set. You want it to limit information search if your brand is the preferred brand, right? So if you have, the preferred brand, you don't want them looking into other products. You want to increase information search if your alternative is not the preferred brand, right? You want to figure out a way to get people to look up more, you know, Tide with bleach, or more detergents than just Tide if they go to the grocery store, or a wholesale club or something like this. And then you want to use point of purchase advertising effectively. I think my next slide talks about point of purchase advertising, because I think point of purchase advertising is actually pretty important. Okay, guys, so the third step in the consumer decision making process is the evaluation of alternatives. And just like the other steps in the process, evaluation of alternatives is affected by cultural, social, individual, and psychological factors. So I'll give you an example. My dad worked at GM. He retired from General Motors several years ago. Um, it could be that if you're in a family with a similar situation, your parents worked at GM or Ford or something like this, you're more likely when you're determining what car to buy to only consider those brands, or those companies. So it could be that you decided to go with, the Chevy brand, or you decided to get an SUV or something like this, maybe a Corvette. I think Corvette runs under Chevy or under GM. And correct me if I'm wrong. Or you could think of something like cell phone coverage. So for me, uh, Sprint is the headquartered in Overland Park, Kansas, which is very close to Kansas City, Missouri, where I'm from. And I have family who work at Sprint. That said, I use Sprint for my cell phone coverage, and I feel as though I would be a black sheep in my family if I didn't. And so when Sprint was really bad several years ago, and they had really bad coverage and really bad customer service, I really wanted to switch from Sprint, but I stayed because, again, I had these social and cultural factors that affected my decision to remain with Sprint.
So we talked about perspectives on decision making, and we went over three different perspectives on decision making. I can't say that enough: rational choice, behavioral influences, and experiential. We also know that consumers have these meta goals when they're making decisions. Right. So ultimately, when you decide to purchase or attend an event, purchase a product or attend an event, watch TV, anytime you make an attempt to consume a product or you actually do consume a product, you have these goals in mind. One, you want to maximize the accuracy of your decision. There's a reason why, if you decide to sit down and watch something on Netflix, you look at the star ratings, for example. You see what your friends may have watched, these kind of things. You also want to minimize the cognitive effort required for the decision. Remember, we don't want to think too much. We're cognitive misers. Another reason that you might look at reviews is that you don't want to have to evaluate too much. You want to rely on other people's evaluations. You want to minimize the experience of negative emotion. Most consumers, I can't say all, most consumers don't like negative feelings. So when you're trying to make a consumption decision, you want to make sure that that consumption decision doesn't leave you with a negative emotion. And then you want to maximize the ease of justifying the decision. Remember, and this is very rational of us, we do like to make sure that we made the right choice, right? And so, one of the things we want to make sure that we're able to do is say, I made the right choice because A, B, and C. And we want that to be pretty quick, right? So think about this. When you're deciding on what job to pursue, when you're deciding on what degree to pursue, you have a story that you're not only telling other people, but that you're telling yourself. And you want to make sure that you can quickly and easily come up with reasons in terms of why you chose that degree or that consumption offering, I guess I should say.
So, as much as I talk about information and how people want information, the fact of the matter is people usually gather what they consider to be sufficient information to arrive at a good enough or satisfying solution. And consumers do that because, to a certain extent, we are cognitive misers. We only have limited cognitive ability, and so we make an attempt to take mental shortcuts and not overload our brains with all this information. This is very common. Most consumers, if not all, are cognitive misers about many, many things, right? This is why when you go on a website, you'll only go up to page 2 or 3. You don't need all this information. You don't want it. Um, we also tend to rely on cognitive parsimony. We usually like simpler explanations for things. And so, if we can find a website that provides simple explanations, we're not going to continue to look and go to try to find more complex explanations because, again, we're cognitive misers. So, I'll give you an example. If you go to Amazon and you put in comforter, On the first page, they show you one of 48 results of over 100,000 results for comforters, right? So if you're a consumer, and of course you're a cognitive miser, what do? You start using the filters they give you. Maybe you say, I only want to look at products that have a 4-star review and up. Maybe you decide a specific department you want to look at. You only want to look at Prime, and you only want to look at 3 brands. You will continue to filter, but what happens if you filter as much as you can and you still end up with 500 results? Do you think the average consumer looks at 500 results? No, they absolutely don't. They may go to page 4, maybe 5, maybe 10 if you have a consumer with time on their hands. And Amazon knows this. And there are theories that, of course, Amazon manipulates the results that show up based on popularity. Some people believe they manipulate those results based on other things. Um, and then there are also theories that retailers that advertise or have their products on Amazon make an attempt to manipulate Amazon's algorithm as well. One thing that's